Hi, Ben.
Hi, Carl. So stupid.
Can't wait till we have like 40 episodes out and we can make a supercut of us just laughing and calling it stupid every single time without trying it.
Amazing. So good.
You
So
have to
so
embrace the campiness.
yeah. The campy music production podcast. Secret Sonics. I like that.
Yeah.
I think that could be our brand.
Let's not.
All right, fair enough.
Yes.
So,
Let's have an off mic discussion about that one. We'll circle back
Okay.
on that idea.
Keep rolling. So Carl, I think you wanted to talk about templates, didn't you? You left us on a cliffhanger in the previous episode, right? Was that what happened?
I did. I feel like it's the only time that there will ever be a cliffhanger about templates because it's probably the least cliffhangerable topic. But I just thought it was a really good segue coming out of the episode about plugins that we love, that we hate, that we go to, as if they were just an extension of ourselves, right? And I know that you do a lot of different things creatively, right? Like with the podcast and with mixing and with production as well. So I'm sure you have more types of templates than I use personally, or I'm curious about that. But I know, like, I have a template that I use for all of my mixes, and it's kind of like a spaceship when you open it up. But I know that everything in there is very intentional, and I just wanted to maybe talk about your philosophy towards templates. If you love them, if you hate them, how deep do you go with them? How simple do you go with them? And what's included?
Yeah, great question. So I do have templates. And the truth is, at this point, I really only have templates for mixing. I have templates for like podcast stuff that I do because that's just super simple and whatever. But we don't have to get into that. Really, at this point, I'm only using templates for mixing. And when I'm kind of doing productions, I'm usually just starting from scratch these days. I'm just kind of like going with what whatever feels right in the room in that moment. But for mixing, definitely I have a template, and I'm actually experimenting with like bringing the template into my production session now, because you could like really easily bring that stuff in the other way around and kind of just afterwards just bring it all in. But my template is super for mixing, is like just it's really dialed in, and it could probably be more dialed in. But yeah, it's mostly routing, as I'm sure yours is as well. And I kind of like, I have it set up sort of how, like in Logic, you have like the summing stacks. And so I have anything that could possibly have a stack has a stack. And so that's kind of keeps everything super organized. And so like I'll have a kick stack, a snare stack, overhead stack, tom stack, bass stack, acoustic rhythm stack, acoustic lead stack, electric rhythm stack, electric lead stack. Everything has a little stack, and I'll make more if I have to. There's like lead vocal, there's like a verse lead vocal stack, bridge vocal stack, chorus vocal stack. Or sometimes it ends up being a low one, or sometimes there's two lead singers and then they'll each have a stack. It could be anything, and however many stacks I need, I make. And then those stacks sort of are routed into my buses, which are kind of more the general, there's like a drum bus, a bass drum bus, a guitar bus, electric bus, etc. So I kind of am just trying, I guess the goal of my template is to give me as many stages as possible to adjust level, to leave room to mess with dynamics or EQ, just to give me as much control in as many different places as possible. So starting from the actual track level into the stack level into the bus level, and that's kind of the basics of my template. And so running parallel to all of that is like a bunch of effects that I tend to go towards. And so I think it's not that many. It's like maybe 12, effects, like whether it's reverbs, delays, double track, auto double tracking kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is all there running parallel. And then that kind of goes into an FX auxiliary afterwards. and then they all meet in the stereo bus. And that's the bulk of my template. And in terms of like plugins, I don't usually have pretty much anything activated, but I have a couple chains that are deactivated and ready to roll if I want to, because I have some stuff that tend to work. And so I'll kind of leave it there, but like deactivate it until I would decide to use it. And that's basically, except for the effects, which are activated, and then I'll tweak them as needed. And that's sort of it, man. That's kind of my that's my template. What about you?
Yeah. Before I talk about mine, I'm curious, do you have sends on all of your tracks and your buses to go out to those effects so you can just very quickly just try, like, think, if you had the thought, I think a long reverb would be cool in here, you just, send 65 or whatever it is, you just turn it up and you hear it, or do you have to manually do it every time?
So I manually send it from the track stack usually. So if it's like, let's say it's the lead vocal track stack, that's where I will send to, let's say, a hall verb or something, if that's what I'm going for. And so then I'll just like, put my mouse there and drag it up and start.
Yeah,
sending.
but I mean, but it's already, like, the send is already routed to that effect. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have the same
I
thing.
might choose. No, actually, I don't. I choose like, I'll choose the effect, but it's like in the initial buses. You know what I mean? So it's like really fast. I don't necessarily, have like, I don't have like 10 sends already from that thing. I actually don't do that. Maybe I should do that. That might be smart. Might be even faster.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's the one thing that I do on mine that's a little bit different than yours is I have different sets of effects for my drums that are different from my instruments, that are different from my vocals. So that way, like, I'm doing a lot of modern, pop and pop adjacent stuff. So there are a lot of times where I want to do a hard mute on instrumental and drum, like reverbs or delays, whatever, but I want to keep the effects of the vocals going. And if I send them all to the same delay send or whatever, then I don't have that ability to be as dramatic and contrasting as I want to be. But I have, for my drums, for example, I have 2 different reverbs and 2 different delays that are just, they're set up right there all the time. So that way, if I think, I think a 16th note would be really cool in here, all I do is just put my mouse over it and just bloop, try it. And I can see, is that better or is that making it worse? And then if it's better, cool. Then maybe I'll tweak the actual effect itself and the settings of that delay. Mm-hmm. But if it gets me like 80% of the way there, then cool. And if I turn it up and then I realize, this is not even close to what I'm looking for, I turn it right back down and I go on to something else, because that enables me to stay in the flow without going into drop down menus of any sort. Like, I'm not trying to figure out, I want a delay on here. What delay should I choose? Which company makes it? Which preset should I use? I have a plate, like a plate reverb on my vocals, and I have like a really long, like, I don't know, 15-second ethereal thing. I've got, I think I have 5 different reverbs and 3 different delays, I think, on my vocals, for example. And they're just different. Like, to be honest, like, it doesn't really matter what they are. Like, I don't even need to bother like explaining what they are, but it's just the fact that they're all different. So I can make an educated guess about which one I think is going to help get me closer to the idea I have in my head. And within 2 seconds, I can see, this is either closer to the goal or further from the goal. And then I can just adjust from there. And that was something that I got from Andrew Mari. Like, my whole template I got from him, like, God, years ago.
I remember you telling me that on your first episode of the show.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
Oh, bringing it back.
It was like glory days, something, or 60 something. I don't know. It was back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Man.
Yeah. But yeah. So I got the template of the original version of the template from Andrew, and he was kind enough to not just send it to me, but to get on the phone with me for like an hour or hour and a half, like walking me through all of it. And all of the plugins have changed, because he is kind of like, or at least at the time, he was very similar to how Matt Huber was saying in one of the recent episodes, how he buys every plugin. And Andrew, at least at the time, was like that too. So he had a lot of plugins that I did not have, and a lot of the UAD stuff that I didn't have. So I just asked him, well, what does this plugin do? Or what's the purpose of this? Like, what's your reasoning for using this
thought process,
this plugin, and like this thought process for that plugin and, what settings did you have on that plugin? Like, was that a really long reverb? Was it a short, like kind of ambience thing? And I just found plugins that I tended to like that were able to not necessarily replicate what he was doing, but gave me a similar uh, cornucopia of sounds, a cornucopia of different processing that I can very quickly find if something is either closer or further from the goal that I have in my head. And that has been probably the biggest efficiency thing for me ever, is just having that stuff all set up and having plugins, like you said, that are on the tracks but deactivated, but
Yeah.
just stuff that I know I'm always going to use. Like I have on all of my drums, I have the utility gain plugin, because I use Logic also, and it's the one where I can just have the phase flip on all of my drum tracks. By default, I have that on there, and it's bypass, so that way all I have to do to check the phase is if I'm layering kicks or kicks and snares together or whatever, I can just bloop, just click a button and find out very quickly. I have Pro Q3 on every track, but just no, it's just like the default setting and it's bypass. But it's just because if I'm going to use an EQ on something, more often than not, it's probably just going to be that.
Yeah.
It's stuff where I know I use a lot of side chaining, just like utility side chaining of just, maybe a dB or two on some tracks when I'm really trying to get these like really dense, big, high energy mixes. And I just want to make sure that the kicks and the snares are just a tiny little bit in front of the other instruments. So I have those routed on most of my instrument tracks.
Yeah,
just
that's really smart
by default, and again, all bypassed, but it's just there because if I'm going to use it, that's the plugin. I'm going to use Kickstart on my kick drum. I'm probably going to use Renaissance Comp on my snare for side chaining stuff to them. So I just have them there. It just makes life so much easier. And that's why most mixes that I do, I'm done with them. And I have like mix one out the door usually in hour and a half, 2 hours.
Dude, that's amazing. Yeah. First of all, that's awesome. And you could do so much in an hour when everything is like systematized, organized. I mean, really the organization for me is really the crux of it. It's just like, I just know exactly where to find everything. I know where it is, and everything has its place, so to speak. The Radiohead song, everything in its right place. I don't know if you're a fan, but
I am, but I'm also a fan of you just randomly breaking out into song.
Got to do it sometimes. Got to do it sometimes. But I never thought about typical side chain things that should be routed. It makes so much sense. All you need to do is just hear it from Carl, and then you could experiment with that. That's a great one. I wanted to ask you, since you're also a Logic user, and this is going to be a good hack for all Logic users out there. There's a program called Plug Search. I don't know if you use this, if you have it. If you don't have it, you need to get it. It's about $30 or something. And they also have, I think there's a package, and they have like a gain thing also. And because like Logic doesn't have like quick things for searching for plugins or changing your gain, you can basically set up key commands to search for plugins and change gain of, the clip gain of any track. And Plug Search is like one of the biggest time savers I use in Logic. So if I want to use Pro Q3, I just hit Control on any slot and just search, Pro Q, and it comes up, enter, and it shows up. So that is way faster than looking through the scroll, clicking, looking through the manufacturer or the type of effect or whatever it is that you would usually search in Logic. And in Logic, I have like a few favorite plugins that are just easily accessible like that anyways. But the Plug Search is just like a game changer in terms of like, I don't even really need to have Pro Q3 on every single track, because it just takes half a second, because it's just like Control, Pro, Enter, there. So maybe it's like half a second that you've saved by having it already preloaded. But everybody has to get Plug Search. Again, not sponsored by anybody.
Yeah. What's interesting is that in the last episode, we were talking about what it takes to convince us to buy a plugin. And
Sold
you're
it.
you're hearing it live, folks. This is me being like, oh, I kind of need that plugin now. That does sound
It's
that
amazing.
sounds nice.
Again, it's like I think it's like a one-man shop, just like just one person just developing this, and it's sick.
Oh man,
Go for it.
I have to check that out. Um, but I wanted to say like the one thing circling back to what you said about the routing and how you like having as many like entry points
Yes.
in the mix as possible. So that way, if I know for myself, I have a very, very similar thing where if I want to put an EQ filter or something on one of the kick tracks, I can do that. Or on the kick bus, I can do that. Or on the drum kit bus, I can do that. Or on the drums and percussion bus, I can do that. Or on the mix, I can do that. So I can be as big picture or as surgical
Yes.
as I want to.
Yes.
But the thing that, and this is an approach that I take, and you need to have a conversation with the client to do this. But what I always tell my clients is that the first mix, my goal is to get 80% of the way there. Okay. And by having the conversation, it makes them not expect everything to be perfect, right? Like I let them know that I'm just doing this as like a vibe check. I just want to make sure that I'm in the right ballpark. So that way, if there's anything majorly off, it's easy to do. So what I try to do by setting up my template the way that I have it and kind of like the way that you have yours as well, it enables me to, at the beginning, focus on the big picture things. I'm fixing surgical problems. Like if there's a weird rumble, like there's always stuff like I don't need 20 hertz in a hi-hat. I just don't. So there are things like that that I'll get rid of then, but I try to do as many of my air quotes mix moves as far down in the chain as I can, so that everything stays fairly easy for me to make adjustments, right? Like I don't get too in the weeds with automations or anything until I get that vibe check thumbs up from the client. And it makes it very, very easy when you have the session routed this way. So when the client comes to you and says, oh, the guitars are really up front, but I kind of want the synths to take more of a lead role. The guitars are meant to be more of support. That takes 2 seconds, like literally 2 seconds to make that shift, because we can just go to those buses we know.
Yes.
We know where to go. We're using a template that we use every day. So we even know like where to scroll through. We know what the color coding is for everything. And you can make those changes. And it's something that's to the client will sound like a really big difference, but literally takes you 2 seconds to do. And I think having the session set up that way, it makes things so much more efficient and more fluid and not as complicated, even though it may look a lot more complicated when you first see somebody's template. Like if you saw my template, you'd probably look at it and, your eyes would go through the back of your head. And I'd feel the same way looking at yours. But I think once you have that set up and you know where everything is, it enables you to get to those landmarks very quickly, and also make sure that you can focus on the things that need to be focused on when you need to focus on them, and not get distracted by getting too into automation and little nitpicky things before the artist even hears version 1.
Carl, can you say, can I get an amen?
So you're asking me you're asking me, can I say it, or are you asking me to say it?
Yeah, you say it.
Can I get an amen?
Amen. That was like such a bad, I teed you up so poorly there.
You know what? I whiffed it too. So
yeah, wonderful.
This is why it's not a sports podcast.
Exactly. But I'm super into that, and I'm totally with you on that. I usually try to get a vibe check first, and I will get a mix 80%. That's exactly the number I use also. And then say like, okay, this is basically, I feel good with this. And that usually takes like an hour and a half, like you said. And then from there, it's all like fine tuning, all the automation, unless it's like really necessary just to even get out that first mix. But usually it's not. You just kind of like wait to do all the automation, all the fine tuning. Once you have that okay, that you're in the right direction, because don't go too far down the rabbit hole of like, and I know people that don't do this. Like I'm remembering from one of my earlier episodes with Justin Long. He used to work out of Barefoot in California, and he said like, my first mix has to be 100% A grade, approved by me. Like this is my mix. And for me, that never tended to work. It always has to be like, let's just make sure we're in the right direction first, because the artist might have a different goal and they're right because it's their song. So
Yeah.
that's
and it
kind
comes
of
down,
my approach there.
yeah, and it comes down to that conversation. Like if you don't have that conversation and the mutual understanding of what the purpose of mix one is, then if they hear your 80% and they think that's what you feel 100% is, then yeah, that's trouble waiting to happen.
Right.
It just comes down to the conversation with the artist. And if they want you to do your 100% mix, then yeah, go for it. But I know with my clients, the 80% landmark kind of works for everybody because we can go into it. There's not a huge pressure. There's not the pressure in the artist, right? Of like getting the email, clicking the link, opening the file, closing their eyes, crossing their fingers that I didn't mangle their song, right? There's that. It takes away the
edge,
the preciousness,
yeah,
of what the expectation is for that first mix, and it makes it easier on me, but also makes it easier on them because then they can just sit back and enjoy the song and just see if it's close, close enough to move forward, not close enough to send out to distribution, but close enough to be able to, keep moving forward and making sure that we're on the right path.
Yeah. I love it. It's like the 80-20 principle, right? Like you put in 20% of the effort to get 80% of the results. And then after that, it's just fine tuning and hopefully nice sailing or whatever the word is.
And I don't know about you, but for me, usually what I consider to be 80% is usually 95% of the work.
Yes.
If I like when I take it to 80% of the way, 95% of the work is done. Everything else is just little
That's
tweaks.
Amazing. Yeah, I would say not quite that high, but usually it's a lot. A lot of the work is done. So that's awesome, man. So Carl, this has been great. I think we kind of gave people a quick rundown on what we think about, why we have templates, what we think about when we're making a template, and how they really help us cruise and work quickly and get out those 80% mixes, which are revved up to become 100% mixes with minimal extra effort. So yeah, this is awesome, man. Thanks for great chat, Carl.
Yeah, the great chat, Ben. You're wonderful. I'm just so glad I get to see you like every week now. Yeah.
I think the best part about bringing you onto the podcast was it just gives me so much motivation to just get on a Zoom call. This is fun. Just like
well, I'm glad. I mean, me too. And I just feel I'm glad, and it makes me excited. It makes me happy, and I just feel bad for Gavi having to listen to us every week now.
Yeah, and giggling and stuff.
And giggling, yeah. Sorry for the giggles, but also not sorry for the giggles.
Sorry, not sorry. Bye, Carl.
Bye, Ben.